Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are undertaking a very important, thoughtful exploration into a passage that is often quoted and deeply comforting.
Mm.
But its context, we frequently overlook it. We're talking about the parable of the lost sheep, specifically as recorded in Matthew 18, verses 12 through 14.
It's an image that really sits deep in our spiritual consciousness, doesn't it? The lone shepherd, the one lost animal, the ultimate rescue.
It really does.
But as our source material suggests, the beautiful simplicity of that picture actually conceals one of the most profound theological claims Jesus ever made.
Hmm.
We really need to slow down and anchor this parable in its precise location within Matthew's gospel.
Because location dictates meaning.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this mission. Our sources really emphasize that Matthew 18 is, well, it's essentially a discipleship clinic.
That's a great way to put it.
Jesus is no longer speaking broadly to the crowds. He's instructing his core followers about how the kingdom community must operate, how to treat one another, how to handle offense, and how to practice reconciliation. And this parable, this story about seeking the one lost sheep, is planted right there in the middle of these really intense practical commands.
Exactly. The entire architecture of Matthew 18 is focused on kingdom living, specifically how disciples interact with those who are humble or dependent or stumbling, the little ones. So the parable is kind of the emotional heart that should motivate that rigorous, selfless living. So what is the central, profound claim the essay identifies that Jesus is revealing about the Father's character?
The profound claim, the statement that just sets the Father's heart on full display, is found in verse 14.
Okay.
The Father is not willing that any of these little ones should perish. And this is so much more than just a sweet sentiment.
Right.
It is a stunning, declarative window into divine intention. It doesn't just describe what God might do. It declares what he wills, his active, persistent, protective desire over those who belong to him. This is foundational security.
And understanding that divine will is so critically linked to the political and religious backdrop of the moment. Our source highlights a very important and often overlooked historical context.
Which is?
This parable appears after the king's public resistance has escalated, significantly. By this point, many of the official channels have really hardened their hearts against Jesus.
That distinction, the hardening, that's key. When the source references judicial hardening, and it's pulling from Isaiah 6 and Matthew 13, what does that mean practically for the disciples listening right then? Are they still able to hear, even as others are intentionally, hardening their hearts?
That's a wonderful question. Judicial hardening means that because the nation, represented by its religious and political leaders, chose to reject the clear evidence of the king and his kingdom.
Okay.
God sovereignly confirmed their rejection. He stopped speaking plainly to the masses. And that's why we see the shift to teaching by parables,
Right.
which reveal truth to those whose hearts are soft, while at the same time concealing it from those whose hearts are hard.
So the public rejection is growing, the crowds are confused, and yet Jesus turns inward. He starts speaking to this smaller, intimate group, his disciples. And he's unveiling something profoundly personal and reassuring about the Father's consistent, unwavering character.
Yes.
He's basically saying, even if the majority rejects me, you need to pay attention to how my Father treats the humble minority who believe.
That's the exact nuance. So while the broad message of the kingdom was being sort of concealed from the hard-hearted, this specific revelation, this intense pursuit of the one that was for Israel's believing remnant,
The core group.
the core group of disciples who had accepted the king and were forming this nascent community.
And while that was the immediate context, the essay makes it really clear that this truth provides abiding, unwavering instruction for all disciples in every age. For us, right now. It also powerfully foreshadows the future care he will display toward his people. It connects this single act of shepherding to the entire story of God's faithfulness.
Linking it back.
Yeah, linking back to promises like those in Romans 11, which speaks of the remnant being chosen by grace, even, amidst mass defection.
It's a vital truth that just stretches across time. It tells us that even if the visible church or the kingdom seems to be facing public opposition or internal difficulty,
Right.
the fundamental care of the Father for the humble, the vulnerable, and the small is utterly unwavering. That stability is the foundational truth upon which the disciples had to build their community life.
That gives us the high-stakes theological and historical frame. Now, let's dig into the context that Jesus' original hearers would have understood immediately.
Huh.
The historical and cultural background of shepherding itself.
Yes.
We had to peel back the layers of romanticism and expose the reality of the work involved.
Yeah.
When we approach the image of the shepherd today, it's often through the lens of art or poetry. We think of green fields, maybe gentle melody. But for Jesus's hearers, this was not a romantic or sentimental theme at all. It was hard, ordinary, gritty labor, charged with extreme risk and profound personal responsibility.
That distinction is just paramount. In ancient Israel, flocks were, well, they were essentially the bank account of the family or the tribe.
Right.
They represented the family's wealth, their trade goods, their financial security, their very livelihood. Because of this high economic value, entrusting a flock to a shepherd required a bond of trust that demanded immense vigilance and reliability.
So losing one sheep wasn't just some minor statistical anomaly.
Not at all. It could have far-reaching economic consequences for the family or the village who owned the flock.
And what makes the shepherd's job perpetually difficult is the fundamental nature of the sheep themselves. The essay points out they are famously distractible, tending to follow their immediate appetite or curiosity more than following the map or the safety of the group. They are, quite simply, prone to wandering into dangerous terrain.
And they often don't even realize the danger until it's way too late. This inherent self-destructive distractibility is precisely why they serve as such a potent, self-evident symbol in Scripture for humanity.
Yeah.
We wander, we lack foresight, we are vulnerable when we're alone, and we almost universally lack the necessary self-correcting instincts to find our way back home since we've gone off track.
Especially as the path gets darker or more complex.
Absolutely. We need help.
So given that vulnerability, the vigilance required from the shepherd was, it was intense, relentless, 24/7. The source describes what happened if a shepherd noticed one missing at nightfall. He had to leave the relative safety of the main flock and retrace dangerous, treacherous paths, possibly with nothing but a staff.
And he's relying on his intimate, almost GPS-like knowledge of the terrain.
Right. The search was costly, often dangerous, and always time-sensitive. A predator might find the sheep before the shepherd does.
Or the animal might fall into a ravine.
Exactly. This act of pursuing the one was not casual meandering. It was an act of intense, devoted, and potentially life-threatening labor. It demonstrates that the valuation of the one was incredibly high, driven by a deep commitment.
And Jesus, of course, was not introducing a brand new concept here.
No, not at all.
He was tapping into a deep, established scriptural tapestry that was woven through centuries of Jewish history and identity.
And that history gave the metaphor its weight. David, a shepherd himself, famously declared the foundational statement of trust, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing."
That just threads the idea of ultimate personal provision and reliance through all of that pastoral imagery.
And then the prophets, they developed the moral and the covenantal framework for shepherding. We can't forget Ezekiel 34.
So powerful.
God passionately rebukes the false shepherds of Israel, the self-serving rulers and leaders who misuse their authority, and then makes this breathtaking divine promise.
I myself will search for my sheep and look after them.
Yes, personally gathering the scattered, binding up the injured, and strengthening the weak.
So, when Jesus tells this story, he is not merely relating some charming rustic scene.
Oh.
He is evoking Israel's covenant history, where God explicitly identifies himself as the ultimate shepherd and pledges to retrieve his own from every dark ravine.
This means the setting is explicitly covenantal, not sentimental. It evokes a long history of God's protective, determined commitment to his people, Israel,
Yes.
establishing the shepherd's action and the father's stated will as this ultimate declaration of faithfulness.
Precisely. And this is where the conversation turns to, well, to social critique.
And this is where it gets really interesting because Matthew's placement of this challenges all these cultural assumptions about value and priority.
Okay.
The prevailing culture of the day, particularly the religious establishment, highly honor the greatest, the wealthy, the prominent, the powerful, the self-sufficient.
And Jesus just turns that entire assumption upside down at the beginning of Matthew 18.
He does.
Just prior to the parable, he places a child, the lowest status, the least respected, the most dependent person in the room, right in the center, and announces that greatness in the kingdom belongs only to those who possess the humility of that child. It's an immediate reevaluation of status. Then, immediately following that declaration that kingdom greatness belongs to the humble, he presents the image of the shepherd, who, driven by this deep commitment, refuses to write off one missing animal. The story functions like a parable mirror held up to the disciples.
And the essay asks the crucial question, right?
Mm.
If an ordinary laborer in the hills, driven by duty and economic necessity, counts and searches until he recovers what wandered, how much more intensely does the perfect sovereign Father regard the smallest, the most vulnerable, and the humblest among his people?
That question just puts immense pressure on all our human calculations of worth.
It does.
We are wired to value the 99, the stable, the visible, the ones who don't cause trouble.
Yeah. But Jesus intentionally shifts the focus to the vulnerability and singularity of the one, thereby defining true spiritual value, not by status or statistical stability, but by the Father's tender, possessive, pursuing regard.
So the shepherd's costly pursuit is the ultimate proof of the Father's valuation of the small.
Exactly. It's a radical inversion of worldly power structures, forcing the disciples to reconsider every single relationship within their budding community.
It sets the stage for a complete reevaluation of ministry priorities, moving from efficiency to commitment, from metrics to mercy.
It does. But first, let's make sure we have the narrative focus clear, particularly in comparison to the other Gospels. Let's quote the text directly one more time because every word here carries so much weight. Matthew 18, verses 12 through 14. What do you think? If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go to look for the one that wandered off? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he is happier about that one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off. In the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish.
That phrase, in the same way, that's the hinge.
It is.
It opens up the lesser to greater comparison. If an ordinary, imperfect shepherd, driven by economic concern or duty, is this relentless, how infinitely more determined, more persistent, and more perfect is the Father's care.
Driven by divine will and boundless, unquantifiable love.
Exactly. The conclusion of the parable is designed to silence all doubt about God's motivation.
And I love that the language describes his feeling as happier about that one sheep than the 99.
This isn't just, a grudging relief that his inventory is correct.
No, it's true profound exultation over a rescue.
Yes. The recovery brings a specific joy that is unique to the finding of something once lost. This is also the perfect point to draw out the essential difference between Matthew's version and the corresponding parable in Luke's Gospel, Luke 15.
Right, because they are frequently conflated, but they have distinct narrative purposes rooted in their surrounding context.
You really do.
So let's define those contexts. In Luke's version, Jesus is speaking to his critics, the self-righteous Pharisees and scribes, who are murmuring that he welcomes and even eats with known sinners. The focus in Luke is squarely on initial repentance.
The conversion of the blatant outsider.
Yes, and the subsequent cosmic joy in heaven over the returning sinner who has crossed from darkness to light.
But Matthew's context, which we just established, is entirely different. It's an internal conversation focused on community structure and discipleship.
Right.
The concern here is not the initial conversion of a blatant outsider, but the Father's protective will toward those little ones, vulnerable, humble, maybe straying, who already belong to him.
So while the result is joy in both cases, the target audience of the lesson is dramatically different. Luke centers the joy of finding the lost outsider and bringing them in. Matthew centers the commitment to the vulnerable insider and ensuring their preservation and restoration within the community.
That is such a crucial insight. Matthew's sheep are not necessarily pagan Gentiles or notorious sinners being called into the fold for the first time.
No.
They are believers, members of the community who have stumbled or been offended or have wandered due to their inherent spiritual distractibility. The focus shifts from evangelism to preservation.
This raises that important question we flagged earlier. How does the shepherd's pursuit fit structurally into the rest of Matthew 18?
Yes.
Because it's not just a beautiful story we drop in. It is integrated into a harsh, practical discipleship framework.
And it serves as the positive motivation for the commands. The parable follows the strong warning against causing little ones to stumble.
Right, which is followed by the almost surgical instruction to cut off whatever would make you stumble.
Exactly. Jesus is essentially saying, protect your own soul and protect the souls of the vulnerable around you, because look how highly the Father values them.
And then immediately following the parable, Jesus outlines the concrete command for the redemptive process of confrontation and restoration.
Matthew 18.15.
Yes, the instruction to go privately to a sinning brother to win him.
That placement is absolutely critical. The structure tells us that the Father's will is not some abstract piety, it is practical kinetic energy.
Hmm.
It moves along dusty paths of pursuit and patient correction, requiring physical, emotional, and spiritual action from both the divine shepherd and the human disciples he employs.
So our mission of painful, often difficult reconciliation is framed by his prior persistent commitment to rescue.
Exactly. We cannot treat the parable as a standalone comfort, but as the engine of communal responsibility.
And furthermore, this story is not unique to Matthew 18. It connects this single local parable to a canonical chorus proclaiming God's shepherd heart throughout the entire Bible.
Yes. The New Testament immediately recognizes Jesus as the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophetic promises. We see Jesus declaring himself as the Good Shepherd in John 10
Who lays down his life for the sheep.
and guarantees their security, assuring them, "No one will snatch them out of my hand." That's the ultimate expression of the protective will of the Father revealed in Matthew 18:14.
And that shepherding commission, it isn't terminated with Jesus' ascension. Peter instructs elders to shepherd God's flock under the authority of the chief shepherd.
Right, establishing the pastoral role as a direct human extension of divine diligent care.
Even the blessing that closes the book of Hebrews refers to God equipping the church for his will, calling him the great shepherd of the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
The Matthew 18 story is so much more than an aphorism. It is a foundational, enduring expression of God's determined character that runs through the whole biblical story.
Defining how God relates to his people and how his people must relate to each other.
With that narrative distinction and canonical connection established, let's move into the weighty theological implications of this text,
Okay.
particularly concerning God's perspective on the world.
Okay.
The core theological significance is really crystallized in that simple declaration. Your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish.
Mm-hmm.
This statement functions like a focused beam of light, exposing the Father's profound valuation of persons who are often overlooked or undervalued by the world, and sadly, sometimes even by the religious community itself.
So let's circle back to that dispensational context. The source material notes that this saying speaks first into Israel's story during a moment of increasing national rejection.
Right.
Why was this specific assurance so critical for the remnant at that specific time?
Well, it was their spiritual anchor. Imagine being a disciple in that moment. The masses are turning away, the religious leaders are literally plotting murder, and the kingdom seems to be shrinking. The humble few who believed might easily have felt isolated, small, or insignificant, perhaps even wondering if they were a failure or if God had abandoned the national promise.
The saying assured them that heaven's profound regard for the humble and the believing few had not dimmed, even in the midst of massive national apostasy.
Exactly. The shepherd king might be rejected by the masses, but he will not lose those who are his. It's a guaranteed preservation for the called remnant.
And the essay traces this assurance forward into the futurist horizon. This is where the depth of God's determined will truly shines.
Yes, when the church age is complete and the church is gathered, the Lord will set his hand again to Israel during the final crisis known as Jacob's trouble.
And the profound implication there is this. The same shepherd who went after one single vulnerable sheep in the scattered safe hills will not miscount, forget, or fail to preserve his designated remnant, the 144,000, for example, in the ultimate storm of the tribulation.
So divine joy at recovery and divine commitment to preservation are not seasonal.
Not at all. They are essential, enduring elements of his eternal purpose and plan. The consistent character of the Father ensures the security of the sheep, whether they are the believing remnant in the first century, the humble follower today, or the protected remnant during the end times.
Okay, now let's tackle the tension that often makes people stumble. The interplay between divine commitment and human obligation.
Right. If the Father's will is sovereignly determined and effective, if he goes, finds, and rejoices and is not willing that any should perish, doesn't that fundamentally challenge the need for human pursuit?
Yeah, the reconciliation as commanded in Matthew 18.5c.
Why do we still have to go if the ultimate result is divinely secured?
That is the essential challenge to every believer, and the essay answers it so beautifully. The Father's will is indeed sovereign and determinative. It stands behind the restoration.
Okay.
But this divine commitment does not cancel human responsibility. On the contrary, it establishes it, it empowers it, and it gives it meaning.
Think of it this way. The shepherd's pursuit is the guarantee. The disciples' pursuit is the instrument.
Oh, that's good. Matthew 18 is full of human commands. Disciples are told to cut off causes of sin, to receive little ones, and to go privately to a sinning brother.
The reason we must pursue the one who strays is precisely because the Father is determined to keep them.
Hmm.
We are not launching a search and rescue operation, hoping the shepherd shows up. We are joining the search party that the chief shepherd has already commissioned, knowing the rescue is guaranteed by his will.
So our striving for reconciliation is not in spite of his commitment, but because of it. Our efforts are empowered and directed by his prior will.
Yes. If the shepherd is this determined to pursue the one, then we, as his followers and his body, must share in that determined, patient pursuit. What God is like sets the template for what God's people must do.
So our human obligation is the tangible expression of the divine commitment.
Exactly. And this naturally leads us back to the crucial question of priorities, what the essay calls training our sense of proportion in ministry. What exactly heaven's math looks like.
Because we often calculate success based on size, efficiency, or visible growth. But the shepherd's priorities seem to run contrary to those earthly metrics.
Heaven's math is profoundly qualitative, never quantitative. And we must be clear. The 99 are safe, and they are not denigrated or forgotten. They represent the healthy core.
Right.
But the one is loved, and the rescue of that one evokes rightful, extraordinary exaltation. The one is not statistically impressive. The rescue of the one is spiritually magnificent.
Let's create a contrast to make this really land. Imagine a ministry focused on maximizing attendance metrics. Quantitative.
Okay.
They might ignore the single struggling person because that pursuit is inefficient, it's time-consuming, and it takes resources away from the 99 who are contributing to the growth goals.
Now, contrast that with a shepherd-driven ministry, qualitative. They prioritize the meticulous recovery of one marginalized member, one person struggling with addiction, or one family alienated by an offense.
And that rescue may take weeks of patient, gentle, and unseen labor that would never register positively on an efficiency report.
But that rescue brings the unique joy that Jesus describes.
This means that any theology or ministry approach that focuses only on maximizing numbers or minimizing risk, but cannot pause to sing with that same joy over the restoration of a single person, has fundamentally failed to learn the Father's tune revealed in Matthew 18.14. It's a profound challenge to cold transactional ministry practices.
Joy in this context is the true theological metric. The measure of success is not only how many remained in the fold, but that ecstatic, happier about that one sheep moment when life and safety are restored.
It redefines what constitutes a worthwhile use of energy and resource.
It is always worthwhile, always efficient in God's eyes, to rescue one soul.
That is a truth that needs to permeate our daily lives. With that understanding of the Father's heart, let's translate this shepherd's disposition into concrete steps for our lives and our community environments. The first most intimate lesson is about God's personal care. The common temptation is to believe that because the world is so vast and our lives are so small, he must surely delegate the searches or wait for the sheep to stumble back, injured and remorseful. But Jesus says he goes after the wanderer.
He is not a distant supervisor of a global spreadsheet. He is the personal searcher, the one who initiates contact. If you, the listener, are tempted to imagine that your smallness, your vulnerability, or your current wandering disqualifies you from divine attention, you must hold fast to Matthew 18:14.
The shepherd cares for names, not merely for numbers in a census. Think about the physical, intimate effort the search implies. Climbing the ridges, checking the ravines, enduring the darkness.
Right.
He keeps count, not because he's a bookkeeper focused on a tally, but because he is a father focused on the distinct, unique value of his child.
His care is defined by intimacy, individual knowledge, and relentless pursuit. His commitment is to you, personally, as one who belongs to him.
Now, let's turn the parable toward the fellowship of the church. Application 2. Our responsibility as fellow sheep. If this is the Father's heart-pursuing, determined, gentle, how should we walk toward straying brothers and sisters? This is where the divine commitment translates immediately into human mission.
And as we mentioned, the immediate instruction is Matthew 18.15. We must go. But the crucial element is the manner of our going.
Yes.
It must be in gentleness and truth, aiming to win the person, not just the argument or to enforce the rules. It's a redemptive confrontation, rooted in the shepherd's desire to restore, not to punish or condemn.
The goal of Matthew 18.15 is explicit. If he listens to you, you have gained or won your brother. We are seeking recovery, not retribution.
And that's the difference between correction that aims to crush and correction that aims to lift up and carry home.
It is. Other scriptures reinforce this pursuing love, filling in the practical steps. Galatians 6 tells us, if someone is caught in sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently.
And in the process, shoulder their burdens. It's a mandate for communal vulnerability and shared responsibility, recognizing that we all carry heavy loads.
And James underlines the high stakes of this mission, adding that whoever brings back a wanderer will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins.
This isn't just nice community work, it's high-stakes spiritual preservation.
It is. And this tells us that you're pursuing love. Your phone call, your patient letter, your quiet visit, your refusal to dismiss them is one of the shepherd's chosen instruments.
He literally searches through our steps, through our patient, gentle visits. We are the hands and feet of the determined search.
This leads directly to the sober corollary, a warning that flows implicitly from the parable. Contempt for the small, the humble, or the stumbling directly contradicts the Father's will. Jesus warns against despising the little ones, even hinting that the angels of these humble ones have direct access to the Father's presence.
And in a day, much like our own, that prizes platform, reach, and visible success, the kingdom calls us to prize humility and proximity.
The parable elevates the value of the unnoticed ministry.
So who are the little ones today? They are the nursery volunteer nobody thanks, the weary caregiver who hasn't seen obvious results in their labor, the new believers struggling to find their place.
Or the person marginalized because of their background or past failures. These people are not peripheral to the mission.
No, they are named, valued, and sought. To genuinely walk with the shepherd is to share his intense concern for the least visible members of the flock.
And if we become so focused on managing the successful 99 that we start ignoring the one who is crying out in the distance, we have fundamentally failed to internalize the lesson of Matthew 18. We've prioritized efficiency over love.
There is also deep, essential comfort here for those who intercede for straying loved ones. This is application 3, comfort for the intercessor.
Yes, because we are so often tempted to despair in prayer when we see no immediate change.
But the parable assures us that the shepherd knows the ridges where they walk. He knows the thicket of their choices, and he knows exactly how to find them.
So prayer is not a thin rope of desperate hope.
No, it is active, empowered participation in his search.
And when Jesus describes the shepherd as being happier about that one sheep when he finds it, he is revealing a profound, determined, divine delight in rescue.
And this delight is what invites the intercessor to persevere without giving up. Keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking.
The shepherd is not indifferent. He has already declared his will. He is not willing that this little one should perish. Our perseverance in prayer is a confidence in his purpose. We are praying according to his known, determined will for the little ones who belong to him.
Finally, let the parable reshape your own movement if you are the wanderer. Application 4, comfort for the wanderer.
Our source highlights a very common spiritual mistake: trying to fix oneself and staggering back to the church or to God with a pretense of dignity and self-sufficiency intact.
And that impulse is rooted in misplaced pride, a desire to prove you weren't that lost. But the lost sheep cannot fix its broken leg, nor can it navigate its way back through the treacherous paths. The shepherd's call is not fix yourself and return. The call is simply hear and be found.
The lost sheep simply yields to the sound of the shepherd's voice and allows itself to be rescued.
And the testimony of those who've been found is universally the same, echoing that joyful scene in Luke. He lifts, he carries, he rejoices.
He doesn't meet the sheep with a stern lecture about the cost of the search or chiding about the mistakes they made.
No, he celebrates the successful rescue.
The powerful, life-altering confession of Psalm 23, "He restores my soul," is not just abstract poetry. It is the real-world, intimate experience of feeling the shepherd's crook safely pull you back from the edge and the strong arms bearing you home.
The burden of achieving restoration is on the shepherd, not the exhausted, wounded sheep.
And the burden of seeking out the straying is on the body, led and energized by the chief shepherd. This powerful imagery brings us to the close of our deep dive. Our deep dive today has reaffirmed one of the most beautiful and challenging truths in Scripture. Jesus, who is himself the Good Shepherd, invites his disciples to see the Father's will through the specific, personalized lens of that one missing sheep.
A singular focus that overrides all human calculation.
It really does.
And the commission remains clear and persistent for us today. Value the vulnerable, refuse contempt for the small, pursue the straying with patience and truth, and rejoice wildly, qualitatively and unapologetically at every recovery.
The essay assures us that this intense personalized care, which first steadied the believing remnant within Israel during the king's rejection, continues to shape the church's pastoral life now.
And it will climax in future preservation as God gathers his people for the glorious appearing of the chief shepherd.
So let this parable achieve what Jesus designed it to do. Let it clarify the Father's heart, which absolutely refuses cold economic calculations about the extendable. The Father, by divine definition, will not be content without the one.
And when the recovered meets the shepherd's joy, our song is meant to harmonize perfectly with heaven's song. Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep.
To leave you with a full picture of the shepherd's tender character, we return to the passage used to close our source material, Isaiah 40, verse 11.
Such a beautiful image.
It is. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young.
And this just highlights the main encouragement we've discussed. His care is deeply intimate. He gathers the young lambs, the weak, the new, the small in his arms, and carries them close to his heart. And crucially, his methods are gentle. He leads those who are exhausted or overburdened, those who have young and must move slowly. This is the determined yet gentle character of the one who seeks the lost.
May that intimacy and gentleness guide your steps this week, reminding you that whether you are actively pursuing a straying loved one or whether you yourself are resting in the deep personal assurance of the shepherd seeking you out, you are known, named, and protected.